What's up, guys? This is Holy Monday. Yesterday it was Palm Sunday, and so Jesus showed up to Jerusalem. They welcomed him in, and at least according to Mark, the first place he goes to is the temple. And I think Matthew and Luke said the same thing, but he goes in there and he doesn't really like what he sees. A place that's supposed to be sacred and a place for prayer, instead had been turned into a marketplace. And notably, the place that was used for the market was like the only place that Gentiles or non-Jews could go into. So it would be like the first impression, somebody that isn't from the area or doesn't belong in like the other parts of the Jewish temple. That's like their first impression of what they do there. And so Jesus raises Cain and he flips tables and he pisses a lot of people off that way. But his statement about why he was doing it was very clear, that like, hey, this is not what purpose this serves. This is not any kind of place for commerce that can be handled outside of the temple. Then he walks outside, and this is kind of an odd exchange, but it carries a lot of weight with it. He sees a fig tree, and he goes up to get figs from it and realizes there's no figs on it. And so he curses it, and his statement is that, like, you're not going to ever raise fruit. So a lot of the disciples are taken back by this. Mark even says that, like, it wasn't the season for figs. But, like I mentioned a week or so ago, that everything is symbolic. That statement that Mark gave about it not being the season for figs is a really big clue. Mark does this several times. He'll make like almost a very subtle statement that carries with it a lot of weight. Mark is probably my favorite gospel, just as a side note, because it's so simple to read. It's very matter of fact. But if you're not on your toes, if you don't have sort of your symbolic thinking hat on, you're gonna miss the depth of what he's trying to tell you. So Jesus curses this tree and it withers up and dies, and the disciples are like amazed by this too, because they witnessed this tree just kind of withering up to nothing. But very clearly, the point isn't about the tree. It's about the temple. And it's about how this cultural institution that's supposed to point people toward hope has been used for the wrong purposes. And so the story kind of ends there. But on Holy Monday, it's very important for us to kind of pause early on in the Holy Week process and think about the nature of sin, because that's essentially kind of what changes the tone of Holy Week, going from celebrating Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem one day to crucifying him by the end of the week. And so a couple of major points to keep in mind whenever we're thinking about sin. First off, sin is nothing more complex than just not living out the design that God had for you when you were created. It comes from this word in Greek called hamartia, which is like an archery term, meaning they just kind of miss the target. And so then you atone, you become at one, like literally draw a line between the T and the O in the word atone, and you become at one with your design. And that's what brings you out of sin. But one of the complicating natures of sin that we really don't get a hold of well in Western culture is that sin is often very corporate. We like to look at people individually and think they're doing this wrong, they're doing that wrong, they should do this better, they should do that better. But we're all connected. When one of us fails, all of us fail. And when one of us is picked up and dusted off and pointed in the right direction, we're all picked up and dusted off and pointed in the right direction if we keep our eyes open. So don't ever convince yourself that you're not part of the problem, or that the problem is outside of you. But also, don't think that the story just ends there. You guys take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.